So how to be lucky, really? This is our question. And I said to you that this is the second edition. I don't know how many of you already watched the first part, the first edition, but I want to summarize to you what we did in the first edition. So, in the first edition, we tried to give a different perspective about luck. So, luck is not just mystical or random, but is actually deeply connected to the way our mind notice, interpret, and move through the world. This is something really, really important. So we think we were always said that luck was something random, something that was happening to others, not to us, and and actually research and also all the clinical practice. I said to you, I have 25 years of clinical practice, and also all my life, because I've been very interested in luck since I was a child, actually. So everything is showing that we can really have an impact on how we can live our life and how luck manifests in our life. So what we said in the previous event is that obviously we are using an approach or a model to explain what is really happening in our mind. That is the schema therapy model. And schema therapy is a very useful approach, a very important approach developed by my trainer and supervisor and a mentor, Jeffrey Young. And schema therapy is talking about schemas that are like lenses. So it says that when we are lenses of our mind, it says that when our early needs, emotional needs, are not met or not recognized when we are children. So everybody has needs, emotional needs. But when we are very little, if these needs are not recognized, welcomed, and really met adequately by the significant others, so usually the parents, in our very early life, our brain starts to structure in a specific way, and our mind starts to function in a specific way. So the neurons starts to connect to one to the other, and and they start to create these kind of clusters of neurons. The neurons are the cells of our brain that are really really responsible for everything in our function, in our body, in our mind. And so this neuron starts to connect to each other in a specific way, depending on the kind of experiences that we are living. And these schemas are created. And when I say that there are lenses, we could also call them like programs that are in our mind. So if let's say we live experiences of neglect, so then we will probably start to develop an emotional deprivation schema, and an emotional deprivation schema will guide us to really actively pay attention to specific aspects of the reality, and so perceive the reality in a specific way, and then interpret the reality in accord with this schema that was created by specific experiences. We have, according with Jeffrey Young, we have 18 schemas, maladaptive schemas. I've been talking about schemas in our previous events so much, so you will become a professional about schemas if you watch my videos. So you will know exactly every scheme, and also you have the ebook, you can read that. So I'm not going to go through all the schemas. But obviously, if we have these lenses and these schemas are really pushing us to notice in the reality only specific aspects of the reality and not others, then this you can see immediately how this can have an impact the on how we build our reality and how we live our reality in terms of luck. So obviously, why we say that these have an impact, because we can definitely not recognize opportunities in many different situations, or even if we recognize opportunities, we could maybe not take these opportunities, and so we will define our life in a specific way. So, and then we talk, schema therapy talks also about coping modes, or also coping behaviors. And we learn in the previous event that we have the surrendering coping behavior, or the avoidance coping behavior, or the overcompensation coping behavior. And so avoidance closes the door. Surrender repeats the same old story. So when we avoid, we tend not to really go forward to life, not to really meet opportunities. And surrendering is really surrendering to the schema, repeating every time the same old story and reinforcing the schema, the maladaptive schema. And then overcompensation, that is really trying to do the opposite, try to do the opposite of what the schema is really all about. And this also overcompensation creates a series of consequences that are usually very negative in terms of luck. So these coping strategies are there to help us to manage the schemas, to manage the suffering that the schemas can bring, but they have an impact on how we live our life. So these coping strategies can really change how our life and how our reality is built up, and also how we relate to fortune or to luck. So people who stay open take calculated risks. This is something really, really important. Connect with others and reinterpret setbacks tend to experience more luck. So the research is showing that. Research is showing that the people that are really perceiving to be luck and having more, also having more opportunities, are doing these things. Not because the universe picks them, but because their mind stays available, attentive, and responsive. This is something really, really important. So, again, the attitude is related to the schemas. The schemas are related to our emotional needs that were not met and probably are still not met. And so luck is determined by all these aspects, internal aspects in our life. So luck grows in the soil of emotional openness. But when we have these schemas, maladaptive schemas, we are not open. We are actually closed into ourselves because we are under threat. So there are several dangers that we are perceiving in the reality related to the activation of our schemas, and then we cannot really pay attention to opportunities, or really focus on what we could do, or in order to be luckier. So why we wanted to do a second edition? First of all, there was a lot of interest. In fact, I want to pause 1 second. Stay until the end, because we create a very important opportunity for all of you. So if you stay until the end, I will talk to you about something that is really, really important. It could be very, very important for all of you. So this second edition was created to because obviously becoming aware is not enough. We want also to try to do certain things. We want to try to start changing the mind, because we said that we we could have several maladaptive schemas in our mind that are really affecting how we perceive life and how we relate to the world or to the universe around us. But the very important thing, a positive thing, is that we can change these schemas. We can create new schemas that are adaptive schemas, positive schemas, and we can change how we deal with our life and how we relate to everything in our life. So we could start to have an impact on luck. And in fact, this is the experience with many of my clients, that they were having a perception of themselves in a certain way. They started to change their perception, and they started to change the perception of the world around. They started not to feel the world as a threatening, but they were starting to feel surrounded by a safe universe. And then they they were, as a consequence, they were starting to connect to people, to see opportunities, to catch the opportunities when the opportunities were coming. When I say opportunities, I'm not talking about winning the lottery. I'm talking about opportunities, especially in the relationships, opportunities in every aspect of life. So they started really to have a series of positive consequences in their lives, and they started to perceive themselves not anymore as unlucky but as lucky. So we need to understand that we if we want to really make our luck growing in our life, we need to go through repetition, and we need to change, do small changes, and we need to start opening up emotionally, and also we need to start to develop courage in relationships. So we want to start today, try to see the connection between awareness of what is happening really inside of us and doing the first step, trying to do something, try to start changing that attitude, that setback in our mind. So as we are saying, our attention, first of all, because our schemas are guiding us to perceive certain aspects of the reality, our attention is totally focused on specific details that are a signal of possible threats or possible negative aspects. When I say threats, they are negative aspects of life. So obviously, if the attention is focused on that in the reality, then it's very difficult, because attention works like a spotlight. So we really bring up and highlight all the negative about the world around us, but also about ourselves. And so if these schemas are there and they are activated, they usually bring inside of us very strong emotions. And when I say very strong emotions, you probably know what I'm talking about, because I bet that many of you had very strong emotions, negative emotions. So these strong emotions are really pushing us to use certain coping strategies to try to feel better, and then it's a vicious cycle, really. And then we keep building up the reality depending on where the attention goes. So, and the attention goes to the negative, because if I go to the positive and I forget about the negative, then the negative could really put me under threat, and I will not be prepared. So I need to be always prepared to the negative, my mind works like that. Our mind works like that. So instead of focusing on the positive, it's more focused on the negative. So the when we start to change, our awareness can really start to move this attention to this spotlight from the negative to possibility, to opportunities, and they start to appear to us. So reality is not really what we perceive it is when we look around, when we live our daily life. Reality, the reality that we are perceiving and living in, is the reality built up by our attention, by our spotlight. If we change inside, then we start to pay attention to many other possibilities, and then at that moment, opportunities happen and we can become lucky. So when our brain operates in fear, shame, or deprivation, as I was saying, it predicts threat. And then this prediction is usually becoming a perception. So it's really perceiving that the threat is there. And then when we are under threat, our mental capacities are totally focused on dealing with that threat, because it's a survival. Our mind goes in a survival mode. So we don't have the capacities we don't have access to certain capacities that are really helping us to connect to the others and to find opportunities around. So the lack is always reduced and actually disappeared. So when this is something really important, lack is emotional before it is practical. So when I say that it's emotional, because it starts from inside of us. So people who feel safe tend to take chances. And people who feel seen tend to connect to the others. People who feel worthy tend to try again. So imagine this. Imagine that you could feel at a certain moment, instead of feeling unsafe, unsecure, or feeling unworthy, then you start to feel safe. You start to feel seen by the others. You start to feel worthy. Then you start to change completely the perception of yourself, of your reality, and then many opportunities will come.